techiebeats.com.
Many consider your album Play as a pivotal keystone for electronic music. Does that album hold any sort of sentimental value to you?
Well, I mean, I've been making music since I was about 10 years old, and in that time I made classical music, I played in punk rock bands, I was a hip-hop DJ for a while, and I've done so many weird different types of music, and in the last 20 years I've made a lot of different types of albums. So the album Play, I mean, it's the most successful album I've had, but it's probably not one of my favorites. I mean, I like it, but
What would be your favorite?
if I had to pick a favorite album of all the albums I've made, I actually like the last two albums I made, which were called Destroyed and Wait For Me, because they're, for me at least, they're more personal, they're more experimental, they're more atmospheric. You know, when I listen to the album Play, the first half of it, I don't like nearly as much as the second half, because the second half becomes more experimental, more atmospheric, and generally that's the sort of music I like.
Cool. Many have accredited you for how much dance music's become mainstream in America. How were you able to put something that was so unknown to the U.S. and make it mainstream?
Well, it's odd because I don't think I had that much to do with making, sort of increasing the visibility of dance music in the States. I mean, it's also odd because my background is playing in punk rock bands, you know, so I love dance music, but it's still funny to be considered like a dance music person when my background is playing in hardcore bands. But I mean, like, the album Play became very successful, but before Play there was the Chemical Brothers, and there was the Prodigy, and there was Fatboy Slim, and there was Crystal Method, you know, so there's a lot of very successful, very well-known mainstream dance music before Play. It's also sort of odd because Play isn't really a dance album.
Yeah.
But
the industry now for dance music, who would you say you're most fond of at the moment? What artists?
I mean, in the world of dance music right now, there's so many amazing producers. It'd be really hard for me to pick my favorites, but I guess if I had to, there's an Australian duo called Loops of Fury who I really like. It changes every week. Boy. There's a guy in the UK named Hervé who makes really good rave records. This sort of dubstep group called Dubsidia or Dubsidia, I think, are quite good. I really like some of the production from Darth Invader. So just I mean, the people who interest me in the world of dance music are generally the more sort of like lesser known people.
Cool. After living in New York for a majority of your life, why did you make the decision to move to LA?
Well, I mean, I was born in New York and I grew up in Connecticut, and I'd lived in New York for almost my entire adult life. And the reason I wanted to move to LA was pretty simple. I wanted more space, and also I wanted to be warm in the wintertime. And New York, when I was growing up in New York in the 70s and the 80s, it was really strange. You know, New York was like a dirty, strange, creative, violent place where any artist, any writer could afford the rent. And now New York is the land of hedge fund managers. You know, similar to, I think a similar thing has happened in San Francisco, where it's become so expensive that a lot of the interesting artists have been priced out. And LA is still this big, huge, sprawling mess of a city, and anyone can afford to live there. And as a result, I think there's a creative community or creative culture in LA that doesn't exist in too many other places, because it's, in order for artists to do their work, or musicians or whomever, they need cheap rent and they need space. And New York, London, San Francisco doesn't have cheap rent or space, and LA has tons of cheap rent and tons of space. And I just really like the fact that, as I said, it's very egalitarian. Anyone can live in LA. And I love going hiking every day. And you know, LA is also so strange because it's such a mix of like urban, suburban, desert, rural. It's the weirdest city I've ever been in.
So you've lived the musician's life, you've traveled, performed, been nominated, won, and recognized through the music industry as one of the most influential people. What's left on the bucket list for your music career?
Well, musically, I never expected to have a career as a musician. I thought I'd work in a bookstore and make music that no one would ever listen to. So, all I really want to do musically is make music that I love. And if it sells, fine. If it doesn't sell, that's fine. But I just love going into my studio, working on music, and trying to create something that I think is emotional and interesting. So that's kind of all I want to do. So I don't have any career goals. So I don't think of making music as, it's not a career. It's just what I've dedicated my life to.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.